welcome back to video 3 of the Other Futures Conference. And so this video is going to include an interview with the fabulous Walidah Imarisha. Who is Walidah Imarisha? Whenever we try to envision a world without war, without violence, without prisons, without capitalism, we are engaging in an exercise of speculative fiction. Walidah Imarisha, US, is a writer, spoken word artist, teacher, and rebel by reason. Together with Adrienne Marie Brown, she compiled Octavia's Brood, which is this, an anthology of science fiction stories about social justice, visionary science fiction, radical science fiction that starts with real-world experiences and imagines new ways of understanding and dealing with them. And I also have here Emergent Strategy, which I've talked about before, and this is a book written by Adrienne Marie Brown, who is part of the collective that does activist social justice work that connects to speculative fiction and Afrofuturism as well. So two books definitely that you should read if you're interested in social justice and Afrofuturism or science fiction or speculative fiction or speculative theory. There's a lot. So please take a look at this interview, and I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that it's a great introduction to Walidah Imarisha's world and her work, and there will be contact information for her in the description below if you're interested in contacting her about her work. Okay, thanks very much for watching this video, and I hope that you enjoy it. Bye. So, hi to people who are watching from ONYX pages, and also hi to the members of the Solar-Powered Afrofuturism Reading Group and anybody else who's watching this. I am in Amsterdam right now at the Other Futures Conference. It is the first science fiction non-Western science fiction conference here in Europe, I believe, or in the world. In the world, and it's been really great. One of the amazing things about it is that I've had an opportunity to meet Walidah Imarisha, and I was first introduced to your work when I read Octavia's Brood, which me and other members of the club, as I've told you, are still swooning over. So I'm happy to be here with you, and I'm happy to say thank you in person for all the work that you're doing. Not only compiling the stories and not only your own work, but being so practical, because a lot of times we have these anthologies that are really amazing, but then we don't know what to do with them after we've read them. So I guess the first question that I had for you is, what are you doing right now? So what projects that you're doing are what's giving you life and what's inspiring to you?
Thank you. And hello up there. So this looks so fabulous right now.
Yeah.
No.
I think we should talk to little white fuzzy things all day.
I know. And it is quite
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, right now I am actually working around a history book on Oregon Black history, which is the area of work that I do. And so I've done a lot of different things, but to me they're all connected in this idea of saying how do we envision different futures. And I think that there's a multiplicity of paths to get there, and so I feel like my work, poetry, creative nonfiction, science fiction, history is kind of exploring. But I'm also working on different short stories, as well as a collection of poetry of Black gender liberation through the lens of quantum physics, called Tubman's Uncertainty Principle.
Holy shit!
So that's pretty fun.
Can you talk more about that? It's in process, so maybe you can't. But what can you share about that?
It is in process. It started as it actually started as a collection of poems written in the voices of fictional Black women, because so many of the creations of Black women that are important to me in media were created by white men, like Storm from the X-Men or Uhura from Star Trek. And I was, I was like, what if they were actual Black Black women who could actually say what they need to say, and they saw themselves in this history and this lineage of Black liberation dreaming. So that's how it started, and then I realized I just sort of felt like I was, traveling through both space and time in terms of traveling backwards to my younger self, traveling into these creations, and really thinking about the principles of quantum physics and how Black, especially Black gender oppressed folks, their liberation has always embodied quantum physics principles. So, the principles, the uncertainty principles, the principle of anything that can happen will happen, that observation changes what is being observed, and really thinking about the ways that that's so true for especially Black gender oppressed, for all Black folks, but Black gender oppressed folks. The observation of external eyes changes the phenomenon, changes our existence. And how have we responded to that, and how have we created meaning as well? So
cool. That's nice. So one of the things that we did today, we meaning me, I got to sit in and participate in your workshop on visionary fiction. And thank you for introducing me to that term and those principles. I really appreciate that you unpacked them in a couple of different venues at this conference. I've used Afrofuturism and I've used science fiction, but I haven't really spent that much time, reflecting on it as a tool. And visionary fiction very much feels like a verb to me. It's a thing that you should do with others. And I got to do that today with others, so I appreciate that. And I'd asked you about the exercise, because you've got a template that you worked on Morgan Phillips, so it's co-created. And I asked you about its use and whether or not it can be taken up and practiced, either with you or without you, by different groups, namely ours in Toronto. And you said something really interesting about what use you were hoping would get out of it. And I'm wondering if you could share some of that now. How do you want this work to be used, and how can it be used in a way that preserves the intent, the original intent in making it, but also that respects the labor that you put into it?
So we're, it was a big thing with us to make sure that we created spaces that other folks can engage in collective dreaming and collective visioning. And I think to kind of break that divide between, you were talking about like author and reader, who has the right to create and who has the right to imagination, and to recognize, we actually not only all have the right to imagination, we all have the responsibility of imagination, that the future is not something, even within the radical movements, that's owned by a certain the thinkers will figure that we are all part of that collective process. And one of the things I love about the workshop is that people who never think of themselves as writers or storytellers, and people were like, you want me to make a story up? Like, I don't do that. Like, every single one of them, 25 minutes later, is like, oh, and then, let me tell you, okay, in chapter 47, this is why.
And I need more time, because I'm not finished telling you about the world I've just
Exactly. So, I feel like we all have so much imagination and so many worlds inside of us, and so it's been an immense honor and privilege for me to get to facilitate workshops and see people's process around that. But one of the things, if people are interested in using the tools we create, we ask that folks contact us, because the principles of visionary fiction are really important, especially to me, in terms of the worlds that we create. I think that if you just take, the worksheet, you can do it, and you can have a fun time, and you can create some really cool worlds, but they wouldn't necessarily be visionary fiction, and they wouldn't necessarily help us to imagine new ways to gain liberation. Because it's really easy to slip into sort of mainstream narrative storytelling. And I kind of see the same things happening again and again, where a lot of times folks want to center someone who's privileged and their journey of awakening. Because that's a story we hear. When we hear about oppressed people, we hear about it through the lens of people with privilege and power, and their awareness and sudden, like, oh my God, oppression is happening. This is terrible. I have to do something. Oftentimes I have to save them, right? And even if they're like, I need to be a good ally, to me that's not what visionary fiction is about. It's not about telling the story of someone with privilege recognizing oppression happens. I think that there's a place in literature for that. There are lots of literature for that. But I think they're legitimate uses for that. But for me, visionary fiction is about saying, like, I'm telling a story, I've been in this, my grandparents been in this, my great-great-great-grandparents been in this, like, welcome to the game, sit down, shush, and like let me tell you. And so centering those voices in these imaginative worlds is really important. I think how change happens is really interesting, and that oftentimes in science fiction, people are creating change by like blowing things up, which is
literally
is because what is that?
It's just a calendar thing.
Oh, okay.
Still recording.
Like, I mean, in Star Wars, in Hunger Games, and all these movies, things blow up or people die. Certain people die, and then things move forward, which is, I'm like, those are tactics, and we can debate whether or not both the morality and the,
for example, something like that I would sit
practicality of these tactics or the time and place for these tactics, but they're not visions of the future, they're not end goals. But I think because so much of science fiction, mainstream science fiction says that people instantly kind of go there. Rather than saying, how do we create collective processes within these stories? I mean, Octavia Butler wrote consensus meetings.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, y'all.
Yeah.
And I want to read this consensus meeting, which if you had told me, like, you're going to read this consensus, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
But, I think, to me, I'm like, that's the art of an amazing, like, genius storyteller, that they can take this piece of collective action that is so key and is often so both difficult and, when you're not in it, like, tedious, and make it something that is integral to the story and something that you're invested and engaged in. So I feel like more stories like that to me is visionary fiction, where it's showing these pieces of collective action and struggle that are really necessary, and not just showing it as the action of one person or a handful of people.
And that's why I asked you if you would do it too, because that's the other thing.
And also not creating like really neat endings.
Yeah.
Because that's what we also get, is really neat endings. So, so I'm just saying, like, for me, that's part of why I'm like, I want to be connected to folks who are using the tool, so that they can make sure they're reminding folks, because it's, it's so easy to go down that path because it's so warm, and that's the stories we hear, and that's where it goes. And to remind folks, like, we have to challenge this. We're challenging it in our organizing work, so we have to challenge it in the stories we're telling each other and imagining and telling collectively.
So I have a booktube channel on YouTube, and I read books, and I talk about the books that I read. And I recently read the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. And there's this really interesting thing that she does there about community, and community after a season, which I think can be a helpful metaphor in terms of apocalypse, the big ones and the mini ones. And there was this scene where the main character takes it upon herself to use her power to like shut down an argument. Mind you, it's an argument that was taking up time that they needed because they were being invaded. So like, yeah, she had to shut it down, but the community was really angry, and the leader of the community was angry with her because she asserted her own her individualism in that moment, and that was everything that the leader had tried not to do. And so I feel like, reflecting on what you said, as a reader, because my next question is about readers, as a reader, I hope that other readers look for these themes in what they're reading, and those who have the power to review books comment on those issues as well, because in my view, the books and the writing that's out there needs to be amplified even more, and that one of the ways that we can do that is by recognizing it, right? Like Octavia Butler is an incredible storyteller and was so diligent about her craft and was so inspiring to people. But people also take up her work as pure entertainment, while I've seen others take up her work as though it's sacred text. And so there's so many different points of entry, and of course I'm further towards the sacred text end of the spectrum. So it's just a comment. But what message do you have, if any, or what thoughts do you have about readers and the importance of readers and what readers can do in their reading or in their sharing of what they've read in order to advance the principles of visionary fiction? It wasn't visionary fiction. Is it vision? Yeah, visionary fiction. Yeah. Okay, I'm excited, so I forget things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that readers have a big role to play. I do think it's important to note, that it's not all about the market, right? Because that's one of the one of the fantasies that capitalism tells us, is that capitalism says we're completely responsive to what the market wants, what the people want. And so, you're not getting this because people don't want it, right? Which reinforces people's feelings of isolation, people's feelings of powerlessness, people's feelings of there's something wrong with me that I want this because no one else wants this. And we see, huge disruptions of that, like the Black Panther film, which has sold out more tickets than any other superhero film before it's even out. And it's like, obviously people want this, but we don't see in production, 50 movies focused on Black superheroes. And I'm like, oh shit, right? So I think it is important to challenge the notion that that the capitalist market, is a reflection on what people want and what people are reading and what people are engaging with, because I don't think that's true at all. The market, like capitalism, isn't just about making money; it's about making money within the mechanism of maintaining social control, because it takes the long view, and capitalism will sacrifice some immediate gains for that long continued social control. So I do think that that's an important framework. But just within that, I think for readers to always, like, I feel like every writer says this, but like write reviews on all of them. Just cut and paste the same review, but
it's true.
Be putting it out there, right? And to be sharing those points that you said without spoilers, obviously. No spoilers. Sharing this was visionary, this was innovative, this blew my mind. I didn't expect this to happen, or this is something I've longed for. So that other folks, I read reviews of things before I read them, and if I see something like that, something that I'm like, I want that too, I'm going to move that to the top of my list versus other things where I'm like, oh, that synopsis sounds cool. And so I think that that's really important. And I do think it's important, for readers to kind of be ready for it. Because I think, I think all of us, and myself very much included, we want these spaces of liberation, and we every day deal with so much colonization of everything. that when we get it, it can be really jarring. You know, I teach at the university, and I try and shift the dynamics as much as possible. I don't think you can create a liberated classroom because there's still a complete power imbalance. And I think that that's the other piece that's really important, always to recognize and be honest about power. And I tell students, I want y'all to have as much input as possible. At the end of the day, I'm not going to pretend like I'm not the one who's giving you a grade and therefore I don't have more power than you. That's the reality, and I have to own that power. And I have to create systems to make me accountable for that, because this system has not created it in general. So I and we need to implement those systems as well as possible. But, you know, so I think, but sometimes when I create those spaces, you know, students are resistant to it because they're like, I'm just supposed to sit here and you're supposed to talk and I'm supposed to take notes and remember it long enough for the test and go home. Like, this is not what I expected. And I'm like, I feel you, right? Like, it's jarring for all of us to do it. It's still scary for me to be like, okay, the last 4 weeks of my syllabus have nothing on it because we're going to decide together. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But, you know, so I think for readers to, you know, to be ready that, like, you know, it's interesting, I've read so many books that, you know, folks have been like, oh, this was great except for the ending, right? And I'm like, oh, the reason you didn't like the ending is because it wasn't this, like, epic battle, like everything else, like you're expected, where the good wins. Like, it didn't give you that level of simplistic satisfaction. Satisfaction. That's what I was gonna.
I also like satisfaction.
Satisfaction. You know, these characters are complex. I think a lot of Octavia Butler's work is really challenging for folks because, you know, the characters are not easy and these situations are not easy. And there was a school that read Lilith's Brood. It read Dawn, the first book of her trilogy, Lilith's Brood. And the students were like, well, are the Oncology good or bad? And I was like,
right? Like,
like
who knows why both, what, like, yeah.
And it's like, I mean, but it's, you know, it's like, that is, to me, I'm like, well, that's not the question to be asking as a reader. Like, that question isn't going to get you any sort of satisfaction. So, you know, the other questions are, you know, are things like, readers have to ask more nuanced questions and be ready to, like, engage with writers who are not going to be giving them, you know, like in that Lilith, you know, we love her and she helps to make the potential destruction of humanity possible, right? And we're like, she didn't have any other choice. Like, we have to defend her and be like, leave Lilith alone, rather than being like, we love her and, you know, this is complex and there's so much happening. And so to be able to hold, if we really want complexity, if we really want liberatory visions, we're going to have to hold a lot more as readers than we have in the past. And I think there's space for all kinds of books. I'm like, I think there are spaces for stories that are, you know, simple, like good and bad. Like, you know, I'm like the Star Wars sort of narrative of good versus evil and like the ability to move between it, but there's a clear delineation between good versus evil. I'm like, I think there's a place for stories like that as well within a liberation framework. But I think the stories we're lacking are those stories of complexity, those stories that actually feel real. Like when you're reading them, you're like, I don't know. Like, you know, Star Wars, you're like, I'd be a Jedi. Oh no, I would not be a Sith. I'll tell you what. I'd fight for them. I'm on the side of good. You know, but in Lilith's Brood, I'm like, whoo, I don't know what I'd do, y'all. I don't know could I live? Would I rebel? Would I have the little baby? You know?
I was, when I read the first two Binti novellas, and I've felt this in a couple of works that I've read by Okorafor. I'm sort of right at the end, and I was like, a sexual assault has just happened, and like, it was in a metaphor, so I didn't see it. I didn't see it for 60 pages. And one of the things I appreciate about these disturbing reads is that I get to learn, right, in that. Because I remember I've read Lilith's Brood now thrice. The first time I was trying to figure out...
Thrice.
Okay.
That's amazing.
I read it thrice, and the first time that I read it, I was like, are the Oankali good or bad? Because, like, in the first 3 chapters, they were good because they were nice, and in the next 3 chapters, they were bad because, like, she's enslaved. And then they're good because they let her out with a tree. Like, you know, and I was like, okay, but now they're bad because... And so, like, that was my first read. Yeah. And then 8 years later, after growth, I returned to it, and I was, like, different, right? I was like, it's not that clear. And then on my 3rd read, I was like, that's not even the fucking question, right? But it took over 8 years for me to sort of move through that process. And I like the work that I'm reading for that very reason. So in the Binties, when I've read them, and speaking to other readers reading them, I'm just like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? Like, how did I miss the control of this person's body? And where in my life am I missing that? Like, what does this actually mean about how desensitized I've become to violence? And so as a reader, you know, I'm trying to be forgiving of that, right? Yeah. But also to be really thankful when I get opportunities like this to meet the authors and be like, that was cool, right? You know, to sort of see that. And one of the things I appreciated about Octavia's Brood was I noticed how close I was to doing good work in my mind. I was in certain aspects, and how far away from my ideal of, like, living my principles and living my truth, right? And Octavia's Brood was not an easy read for me. Some of the stories were really pleasurable and were fun, and then others were arresting, and some, like, just made me feel like crap, right? And I was thankful for the whole process, because that's very much like Monday through Sunday of my life, right? So it was, so that was good. I really appreciate everything that you've said, and thank you for your time at this conference, carving some time to speak to me. Is there anything that you would like to say as a last or final word?
No, I'm thankful for it's like I can hold the fuzzy to myself. I'm thankful for the work that you're holding, and the space that you're holding, and the spaces of creation that you're holding, just from hearing, the littlest bit, how you've, talked about the work that y'all are doing and dreaming is I think is to me, just really inspiring. And I also feel like makes me feel empowered to continue doing the work that I do. I think that Octavia's Brood has changed my life in many ways, and I think one of the biggest ways is it has made me feel much less alone, and much more, and understanding so much more how many amazing visionary folks are dreaming liberation, and that I feel like every time I meet someone, I sort of feel like we come into this collective consciousness where I'm like, I hope to see you again, but if I don't, like, boom, like, we'll be there, like quantum physics, like particles across the, thousands and thousands of light years apart can affect each other, and it feels, I feel like Octavia's Brood has brought me closer to that, and I'm thankful for that, because I think the people that from light years away are impacting me are exactly the people that are not impacting me, like you and the work that you're doing. So, thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you very much for watching all 3 videos of the Other Futures Conference series. I have a bit of a bonus for you. I had a wonderful opportunity to meet some other folks and to see folks I hadn't seen in a while, so I'm going to show you a few pictures. I had an opportunity to talk to and hug and listen to Nalo Hopkinson, who was there at the conference, and that was absolutely amazing. I also had an opportunity to meet Dilman Dilla, who is an Afrofuturist author as well. He is Ugandan born. A copy of his book, which is called A Killing in the Sun, so you should take a look at that. He's also written a really interesting article about the difficulties in writing Afrofuturism as an author. So I'll link a link to the article in the description below. And just lots of other people. So there may be some pictures in this video I will put over here, and I hope that you enjoy it. I don't know whether or not the Other Futures Conference is going to continue. My understanding is that the goal was that the organizers would hold this conference every 2 years. So if they do, I will definitely be back. I would like to thank the organizers for putting this conference together. It was an amazing opportunity to meet people literally from around the world talking about science fiction and the importance of centering voices, non-traditional voices, voices that are typically marginalized in our stories, because this future is going to be co-created by all of us, and it's time to be more equitable about the ways that we, and more responsible about what we do with our imaginations. Okay, thanks for watching, and see you next time.